At MFGS Inc., Micro Focus's exclusive master supplier to the U.S. government, we help you run and transform your agency in a changing world. With a holistic set of solutions backed by a robust analytics system, our customers are addressing the 4 core pillars of digital transformation. Our mission is to provide your agency the ability to bridge the existing and emerging technologies, allowing you to move faster, have greater agility, secure what matters most, and surface critical insights, all while removing the need to take a risky rip and replace approach, so you can run and transform at the same time. At Micro Focus, we call that smart digital transformation. For more information on how MFGS Inc. can help your agency, please visit us at
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ray Cross, Vice President for the Intelligence, AFCEA International.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the CIO Perspectives breakout session. We have a great lineup of IT leaders with us today from NSA, DIA, ODNI, and U.S. Central Command. They're going to share their insights on future technology investments, remote work challenges, open source, and more. It is now my pleasure to introduce John Farrell, Strategic Manager for Micro Focus Government Solutions, who will introduce our moderator. Over to you, John.
Hello and welcome. I want to thank INSA and AFCEA for their leadership and support to the U.S. intelligence community. The Intelligence National Security Summit is an invaluable forum that brings the U.S. government and its partners from the private and academic sectors together for multiple days of invaluable plenary sessions. The summit enables senior leaders to share insight regarding issues of vital importance to our national security and shed light on how organizations must respond to the demands of COVID-19 and remain mission-focused. MFGS Inc., Micro Focus Government Solutions master supplier to the U.S. government, has been a proud sponsor of the Intelligence and National Security Summit premier forum for many years. We're honored to be here today with all of you and value the IC community personnel and their courage to defend our nation during these uncertain times. With that said, I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Louis Shepard. He's the Deputy Chair of the AFCEA Intelligence Committee. Louis is a Senior Director of Technology Strategy with VMware, where he leads disruptive prototyping efforts of specific relevance to federal government agencies, particularly the national security community. Louis, thank you.
Great. I'd love to welcome everyone to this session. As part of this fantastic multi-day summit, we're extraordinarily pleased to be able to highlight CIO Perspectives. There's nothing more central to the business of intelligence and national security than information, and so we're very pleased and fortunate to have a great panel of chief information officers in the intelligence community with us here today. We've got the Chief Information Officer of ODNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Ms. Sue Dorr. We've got General Jeth Ray, who's the CIO at U.S. Central Command, one of the most important and involved and largest combatant commands in the Department of Defense, and he's the J6. Fulfilling that role there. Doug Cossa, the Deputy CIO at the Defense Intelligence Agency, my alma mater, and Greg Smithberger, who's not only the CIO, but also the Director of the Capabilities Directorate at the National Security Agency. I'm going to go around the horn here with the panelists and an opportunity for an elevator pitch for their work at their agencies here. And I know that we're going to talk in a moment also later about the very pressing topic of the day, the COVID-19 pandemic, and your agency's responses from an IT and tech workforce standpoint. But given the realities of federal budgeting and technology life cycles, I know that you're each thinking as well about the future, not just today. So if I could ask you, and I'll start with Sue Dorr of ODNI, where are your and your agency's greatest investments of focus and financial resources being made now and going forward? Sue?
Thank you, Louis. I, like many others, are really thinking through the modernization of IT capabilities in partnership with our mission, taking advantage of the robust cloud offerings that are coming across the whole of the IC. And we recognize that many of those activities are continuing to mature and expand. So that's a kind of a well-known and probably a very consistent theme across many of the organizations. Another area that we're really heavily focusing on is to take advantage and truly leverage all of the principles and approaches for DevSecOps and how to really get agile pace to mission collaboration and mission capability delivery, and how we think through that and the data management that needs to be brought with that activity. Another area is harnessing and modernizing, getting our arms around the very intense workflow processes and putting those into digital platforms for better agile customer and transparency for delivering services to customers, for customers to understand the state of any of their requests and actions, whether that's for IT services or for the concept of any services writ large. And as I think we're going to discuss many times, as much as we had a need for modernization for on-class capabilities, that was definitely accelerated from where we were thinking at the very beginning of the fiscal year. Thank you.
That's easily understandable. Thank you, Sue. General Ray, thanks for joining us. I wonder if we could hear your thoughts on that.
Hey, thanks a lot, Louis. I appreciate it. I'm glad to have the opportunity. As most of you may not understand specifically my position here at CENTCOM, I'd like to just give a little brief intro of that and what I provide here at CENTCOM as the J6 and the CIO as well. So I advise the commander and the staff when it comes to all things communications and a lot of the data processing that takes place here. We also have the ability for infrastructure not only here at CENTCOM headquarters, but in our AOR as well. And then we interact daily with about 52 nations, and working in this COVID environment has challenged us more than you can imagine. So as a distributed workforce right now, and as a distributed coalition environment has really challenged what we bring to the table as far as information sharing. So we have leveraged a lot of the DoD capabilities as we are on CVR today, which is our Teams environment, has really improved our collaboration environment. And so that has really improved. One thing that we had a change here at CENTCOM is our transport. So our transport capability, we had a really increase because of the number of VTCs that were required in this telework environment. So our pipes were not at the size that we needed in order to take on such a challenge working distributedly like this. And then interacted with our partners, leveraging different transports to get information to them and share with them. So that is where we are now and what we're trying to do. I'll elaborate on a little bit more, but the same technologies that Sue spoke about, the same things that we're trying to leverage as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Doug Cossa of Defense Intelligence Agency.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here. So for our agency, we started the year with 3 priorities. The first being, which many of you heard about, is MARS, which is creating new capabilities for how we understand, process, visualize foundational military intelligence. And that we're doing that across the IC and DoD, integrating data. The second being open source, creating a hub to integrate DoD collection analysis and the tradecraft and the policy manning resources that go along with supporting that as an intelligence discipline. And then the third, which is obviously close to my organization in CIO, which is JWICS, and that is the high side transport for data, wide area network services for the IC and the DoD. We're making big investments in that this year, especially moving out in FY21 to modernize JWICS to support things that we're talking about in terms of capabilities that are over the horizon or even near term, like artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud services, especially as we move to multi-cloud environment, We're looking at how do we need to augment, upgrade, increase the capacity of JWICs to support those things. And then the fourth, which of course we've all realized over the past 6-7 months, is our NIPR environments, our unclassified work environment with teleworking. That's looking at everything from collaboration space to where we store the documents that we're now working on in a remote environment, email, messaging, chat, voice, video, the integration of those capabilities on the low side to support telework has really been an unexpected investment, but one that's really paid dividends for our agency and really our integration across the entire IC and DoD.
That's great. Thank you. You like hearing some good news come out of all this disruption. Greg Smithberger from NSA, thanks on behalf of AFCEA and INSA for joining us. Your opening thoughts here. See, Greg. Greg's not on mute. Nope.
Okay, are we good?
Yeah, now we're good. Excellent.
Okay, happy to be here. Sorry about that. So as you know,
first time NSA has ever had a microphone malfunction on its own. So you guys don't get those jokes too often. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So as you know, NSA has two large and complex missions. Our largest one, our signals intelligence mission, our foreign intelligence mission, looking at communications of all types around the world that might have intelligence value. Our cybersecurity mission, helping to inform the defenders of the U.S. national security systems and our allies to protect our classified information primarily, but also other things of value to the U.S. government and the Department of Defense in particular. So both of those missions involve technology that's constantly changing. So our priorities really sort of focus on sort of developing our next generation mission platform. So some of that involves additional intelligence at the front end of our collection capabilities and getting them to work together. The back end and continuing to evolve that, what we have been referring to in the intelligence community as the IC Gov Cloud, a large scale data discovery, data fusion, data analysis environment that allows us to handle lots of data of diverse types at speed, applying a lot of automation, a lot of big data analytics, some AI and machine learning. That's kind of the core of NSA's, of all of NSA's missions, and that's available to the intelligence community as a shared asset. So continuing to evolve that, continuing to evolve our capabilities for interacting with our coalition partners around the world is another key thing that we're focused on. And then evolving our unclassified work environment was actually a priority well before COVID. And the COVID situation has certainly caused us to accelerate some of those activities, but we've really been sort of leaning into things that we were planning to do anyway, and many dimensions to all of those problems that I'm happy to talk about.
Thanks. Well, actually, let's get right into that then, Greg, and I'll stay with you. As you intimated, you have kind of a unique position there at NSA where so much of the focus is on classified information and work streams. And so as many of your peers on the panel and across the community and DoD are learning lessons about remote work, it's actually been somewhat different from you. And I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit, the kinds of lessons for supporting the dynamic needs you might have in the future for any additional workforce disruptions or avoiding that in future going ahead.
So we have sort of a large distributed enterprise right now. So in our classified world, we do sort of remote working and collaborative work within our classified environment all the time. So it's just part of the way we do business. So we have a little bit of resiliency because of that, different conditions in different parts of the country, different areas of the world that allow us to kind of flex mission into various places to help keep things up and running. That's part of what we've been doing. So it's more remote work in a classified sense. When it comes to that core classified work, teleworking from home just really isn't an option, right? We're really talking about bringing people into sufficiently safe classified spaces, sufficiently distributed to get the work done, and then making sure that our capabilities are as automated as they can be. And we have really benefited a lot from the automation we've invested in over the last decade. We were able to keep quite a bit of mission going with a little bit, with certainly a reduced workforce, but not nearly as much mission impact as some might have expected. So that's part of the good news story. But we have been also working on, as I said, thinking hard about what missions really could be done on the low side, or I would say what mission support activities. NSA doesn't have an open source intelligence mission. Parts of our cybersecurity mission are all about working with, other parts of the U.S. government and industry, and a lot of that work can be done in an unclassified context to share information, to help, understand what the threats are and get information out about mitigations. So the Cybersecurity Directorate is certainly interested in beefing up our capabilities on the low side. Are certainly when it comes to hiring and HR and engaging in virtual recruiting events and things like that. There's a lot of work that we can do on the low side. Within the Capabilities Directorate, for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been thinking very hard about the unique development we do for our classified environment. And we've determined that a lot of those foundational technologies can actually be started at an unclassified level in a highly protected, unclassified environment, and then pushed up to the high side and finished with those very exotic bits of classified technology, and then rolled into our classified environment. So we've been doing sort of a split low side, high side development approach for a few years, and we've been maturing that. And of course, our research directorate works with diverse elements of industry and academia. They have a lot of sort of missions they can do on the low side as well. So part of this has been, improving our collaboration services. Part of it's building out those protected low side environments to do development work, both in some cases with people who have clearances, but we're simply taking advantage of the low side cloud environments and easier access to open source information. In other cases, we've created environments for collaboration on the low side with people who don't have clearances, keeping that separate from the other types of activities to manage our risks. So all of that was part of our game plan pre-COVID. When COVID sort of confronted us, we accelerated some of those plans, and we also rethought some of those things. We were planning to do work in an unclassified environment in a controlled way, but we weren't planning to telework. And when COVID hit, we took a hard look at the way we'd implemented things, and we discovered, the security architectures were actually good enough that we could allow people to telework and achieve the same mission objectives. In many cases, we found that we needed to modify our contracts because although some of the work was allowed to be done in an unclassified space, it was specified to be done on a network that was certified and accredited by NSA, and we explicitly prohibited telework. And it was like, we really regretted that. So we quickly scrambled and modified some contracts to allow also our contractors to participate with us in these protected low-side environments that were built for these specific needs. So lots of things that have been going on. So we are doing some telework. We're moving in many of those unclassified directions, but they're more in the mission support areas. The core of our mission, certainly on the signals intelligence side, will always be centered around top secret operations and information. The Cybersecurity Directorate really is kind of straddling. They're leveraging all the insights from our foreign intelligence and all those top secret and secret insights, but they have a lot of interaction they need to do with people at an unclassified level to really achieve the cybersecurity objectives of the U.S. government. So we're straddling. Certainly, I think Doug's organization has a more explicit unclassified mission than we do.
Well, let's turn to Doug Cossa of DIA. Doug, you mentioned JWICS and the crown jewel of DIA, but you are an all-source agency, so I would imagine the lessons you've been learning involve multi-domains, cross-domains.
Yeah,
Tell us
certainly.
a little more about it.
Yeah, from an all-source perspective, and then of course from an open source perspective as well, as we have that function also. Like Greg, though, the preponderance of our collection analysis is going to remain on the top secret fabric, on the high side. That said, with OSINT, we've certainly accelerated the concept and have developed a pilot to look at what functions of OSINT for collection analysis and otherwise could we do at home in a telework state. So while it's not in an operational implementation, we have piloted out to look at what is in the art of the possible, which we would never have done before COVID existed. So there is the silver lining in that. The other silver lining is it's made us rethink about what the high side environment needs to look like. Where in the past we made separate investments in really stovepipe capabilities for email, for voice, for video, VTC, desktop VTC. What we've discovered on the unclass environment is we were able to work with industry, partner with industry, as well as other agencies just to quite quickly stand up an unclassified integrated environment of all those capabilities. That's the one thing that I'm reminded of through this experience is just how resilient our workforce is and how quick we can solve problems when we're faced directly with them. When we first started this, our email architecture was designed to support really only a couple hundred users concurrently. Within a matter of days, we were up to multi-thousand people connecting into email concurrently, which we were not designed for at all. We had to rethink that entire architecture almost completely overnight. Luckily, we were successful. I think under normal circumstances, that would have probably been a multi-month, multi-year endeavor. For us, it was a matter of days. And I was, quite impressed by what we were able to pull off in a very short period of time. But we're looking at that now of rather than these independent investments, independent stovepipe capabilities that don't necessarily do a good job integrating across, what does an integrated suite look like on the high side for a work environment? The other lesson learned out of this is mobility. Time will tell how we position between telework and working in a SCIF. Without a doubt, now that our workforce is experienced, we've kind of adapted to doing functions at home. There's going to be, and we're architecting for an enduring level of telework, whether that's 5%, 10%, 30%. Time will tell, but I would expect most of those functions will remain on the business side. Things like HR, data management, finance, contracting, training. That was a big one. Almost entirely done on the high side, our training modules that we have. We've completely transitioned that to the low side of NIPR, and it's unclassified. It should be on that. So some of these functions we have begun to move wholesale into the unclassified domain. The other lesson learned, and again, time will tell how we treat this, is in terms of mobility. And flexibility. And I don't necessarily mean that in terms of a flexible work schedule and working from home or in the workplace, but how we treat facilities management. We treat new employees coming in to where you're given a fixed workstation in a fixed location. In some instances, that could be necessary, but in many functions of the workforce, they could work from anywhere within a building. Looking at, can we work from tablets, from laptops, to where you can perhaps even go wireless in the future and work from anywhere within one of our facilities or multi-facilities. Maybe that even extends beyond the IC to where you could go anywhere. So I think it's opening up a whole new world of what's in the art of possible in terms of mobility for us on the high side, taking a number of the lessons learned. And the final thing I wanted to touch on, which we didn't anticipate for, we did, but not so much on the NIPR side, was diversity and inclusion. This focuses on what we would traditionally think of for reasonable accommodations that folks in the workplace may have, for example, to accommodate a disability. But other areas that we didn't quite anticipate were just access to even a computer. And that's been compounded now, of course, that schools are starting up mostly virtual. Most households may have had one or two computers, but with children, students in the households, that's not so easy anymore. So how do we adapt to that, to where we give the workforce access to what they need from home? That's computers, that's CAC readers, which we had to accommodate very quickly to systems to where we have two-factor authentication. How do we get those CAC readers out to the workforce that are at home? So it was a logistical challenge as well that we had to solve. But that'll continue. We've built the infrastructure to have an enduring presence for telework. Remains to be seen what that ratio will be, but we're certainly designing and architecting for it in the future.
That's good to hear. By the way, we're already getting quite a swarm of questions from the audience, which is not surprising given the topic and the people on the panel. So I'm going to adapt one of the questions and use it for General Ray and Sue Dorr. Sue, start with you, since I know you have also an information security background, and also that's an important part of your role as ODNI CIO. We had a question from the audience. With all the increased telework, are users the most vulnerable part of the network? How does the user-centric view of security weigh on your mind, particularly in this moment where you've had to shift to a fair amount of telework for your workforce?
Thank you, Louis. I think, and I'm going to borrow off of something one of my fellow CIOs stated, that if we did not very, very quickly get out sets of integrated IT capabilities, our customers, our users were going to grab whatever was available. And I would like $1 for every time I had some bizarre thing I've never heard of going, can we do a government meeting in that? And it was like, if I don't get out a set of platforms and a set of capabilities that were easily accessible, as others have stated, widely mobile and secure, then it was going to be very difficult to have them come back into that platform in the future. So as Doug had mentioned, I am just amazed at the pace in which the IT staff and with our vendor partners were able to get these capabilities out. And our customers then have said, okay, I'm going to come because you've given me something I can use and something that I can work with, and it's really modern and it's similar to capabilities that my kids are using for school, etc. So they're really used to it. And with that, we've done things that are the multi-factor authentication. We've done the separation of capabilities, virtual desktop environments, etc., so that it is separating from what happens on their laptop, which who knows what, where kids all go to for websites, and how to do that separation so that we can bring in a higher degree of security. But just like Doug had mentioned, we have to be able to still have multi-factor authentication because we just can't have our customers have really easy passwords that are easy to crack or that they write down somewhere or they're texting because they forgot it. So those are just some of the things that I think really made the difference, but it was kind of speed to decent capabilities, robust, available, mobile, really made the difference to bring them into something that we felt much more comfortable with.
Understandable. General Ray, particularly given your geographically vastly dispersed, both CONUS and across your very large AOR, I would imagine that the security implications of increased telework is something you've always had to deal with, but never more so than now. What kind of lessons have you learned?
Hey, Louis, yes. Hey, great comments by everyone. What's important is that when I got on board as the sixth, this environment is very active and it's very vulnerable to attack from our adversaries. So immediately what my team and I did was we decided what would be an attack vector into our network. And we found out that it was social media. And so we discontinued the use of social media across the entire, CENTCOM AOR. so that we could reduce that attack vector into the network. So when the pandemic hit, we had already trained the team on best practices when using social media, both family members and also everyone that worked within our environment. We had about a 9% mobile capability from a on-class and SIPR type capability on the laptop that we travel with. But we quickly had to increase that because we were afraid that folks would use unapproved assets to join our network. So we improved that to about 15%, and we're moving towards about 30 and maybe even 50% of mobile capability on class and secret level capability on one platform, one device, and able to do our work, both voice, video, and data on the move. It's going to be critical in the future. I call it, we have to be transport agnostic, and we have to be data centric. The network centric, having that infrastructure that we were used to in the past, is just not going to be required in the future. I think we're going to have to be more mobile. So we ought to use any transport capable, 5G, terrestrial circuits, satellites, in order to connect back our command and control efforts across the board. So I'll pause there.
That's great. I want to ask a question. It's kind of sparked by some of the, not one particular audience question, but many of them. Actually, it's implicit. You as CIOs, you're determined to field new capabilities as rapidly as possible. And so I know, already got mentioned, you've been adopting DevOps, DevSecOps approaches, but I would imagine that your funding streams, you've got a largely, not explicitly, but a largely industry audience here. Your funding streams and pots of money are still probably in the old color of money, kind of 6.x waterfall variants. So how do you change that orientation? How do you act nimbly from a funding and governance and managerial perspective when you've got this overhang of decades of how the Department of Defense and the community actually fund your IT? And let me start with Greg Smithberger.
So we've actually been doing DevOps or something morally equivalent to that for many, many years. And we've been doing sort of dynamic development and evolutionary development. So we've been working with the intelligence community and with the Department of Defense to look at all the flexibility in the acquisition processes. And it turns out a lot of the traditional approaches can be tailored, and we've been doing even very large scale efforts in a very dynamic way. So it's all about understanding what the objectives are of those acquisition constructs, and then working with overseers to get them comfortable with how we can achieve the same outcomes without committing to a 5-year plan up front where all the discrete deliverables are detailed in advance. We still need to know what we're trying to accomplish, what the rough milestones are, but in terms of how we reach those milestones, we can have a lot of agility. It's the same thing with the platforms we use. We're getting funded to achieve outcomes. The funding, the authorizations, the appropriations don't necessarily specify how we're going to do that. So we have a lot of agility and a lot of ability to kind of achieve the same outcome using a different material solution. So as long as the color of money is right, and so in some cases, it may not be procurement that we need. If we're going to be using a cloud service, we may need more O&M, we may need more RDT&E for those sorts of activities. But that's simply a question of having the conversation with ODNI, with the Pentagon, with Congress about, hey, here's the color of money that we need given the way we're going to operate. But there's a lot of flexibility, even for very large scale systems, to operate in this very dynamic way. When I talked about the GovCloud, over 500 products and services in that, all of them constantly evolving. It's not a big monolithic, we're going to drop a version of this every 5 years. It's a constantly living and evolving thing. And our overseers have been really good about working that with us. So the cloud journey also, I mean, all of our overseers are enthusiastic about, the U.S. government, owning and operating fewer data centers and using shared services and providing services to each other and, adapting the way we think to enable that. So, welcome thoughts from Sue and Doug, but I haven't been encountering any resistance to this at all. If anything, they've been giving us more and more rope to do experiments to help inform how the rest of the Department of Defense might be able to think about these things.
That is interesting. Well, let's ask Sue Dorr. Sue, there you are situated as the ODNI CIO, probably closest to the central flagpole for the community. Any thoughts on introducing agility into the funding process as much as into technology?
So I completely agree with Greg. It's just really having to be able to clearly articulate the outcomes you're trying to achieve and how those objectives would be laid in against very rough milestones. And we need to recognize that there isn't a need to get to the degree of specificity from our overseers on the Hill on how. I don't think any of us want to go up and have to brief of, I'm shifting from waterfall to this. It is just really what are we trying to achieve and to be able to show the measurements and milestones on getting there. Within the ODNI, because I'm not the IC CIO, I'm the ODNI CIO, we too are really marching towards shared services. As a small organization, we are delighted to be part of the larger IC element ecosystem because we have the ability to benefit from the services as Greg laid out. Even in this COVID scenario, we were able to work with DIA and use one of their on-class secure sharing mechanism to keep our workforce informed. And so we are doing very, very similar things and really not having the huge concerns moving forward, but we have to be very clear and then meet the objectives as described.
Doug, DIA, let me toss in to that funding discussion also another question from the audience, which would have real funding implications, maybe positive ones. The original question was BYOD best practices, so bring your own device, ever considered as an alternative for addressing the need for devices and telework in the short term? And
that's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. I do want to hit on what Sue and Greg were just talking about, though, in terms of funding and how we get creative. Before I move on, is that this is the most collaborative bunch of CIOs that we've ever had within the IC. When we say shared services, we really are designing capabilities as shared services. And I think you've seen that with things like iSight, with C2S and GovCloud, and where we're moving in terms of a virtual collaboration environment in the coming year that Greg's team is helping lead. That's really given us the agility to leverage different contracts and different means that we have available across the community rather than just what's inherent in our agency. That's been a huge driver to how quickly we can bring in new capabilities and get them online. We're also collaborating on enterprise licensing, which we've never really done in the past, really in a collaborative sense. We're now approaching that as a community, which again has provided us with a lot of flexibility on how we surge in terms of the number of users or the surge in terms of the types of capabilities that we bring into our own environment. So I do want to really emphasize what Greg and Sue were saying in terms of the collaboration across the services that we're bringing in. In terms of bring your own device, that's not going to happen on the high side. We're not going to allow people to bring their devices in from home. But on the low side, absolutely. And we are, I mean, that's the reality of it, right? I mentioned the access challenges that we have. It's not feasible to give a laptop or a phone to every single person in the workforce and ensure that that is compliant in terms of policy and security. But what we can do and what we've set up are capabilities that allow you to bring your own device and then VPN into our infrastructure in a more secure way. So yes, absolutely. And our ability to do that was part of the reason why our workforce was able to come online so quickly in the unclassified environment. So absolutely bring your own device is part of our unclassified environment.
So Louis, if I could
General Ray. Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Greg.
Key thing underlying what Doug was talking about, though, is designing your unclassified services with the right security framework in mind to mitigate the risks associated with a bring your own device approach. So in our case, we're using, yes, they're dialing in with their own device, but we're throwing up a virtual desktop on that machine that's completely locked down and limiting how that virtual machine can interact with the outside world without going through our corporate network, right? So there are lots of tactics that we can use to reduce the risk, still using the two-factor authentication that Sue was talking about and other things, but it's all about, getting the right, concept of layered defenses that can be imposed upon that personal device without any possibility of getting access to their personal information, which is the other thing that gets tricky here, is making sure that the government is not monitoring or getting access to private information of individuals, which we have no right to see or to monitor. So a lot of thought needs to go into it, but it's viable with the right security architecture.
General Ray, I know you've got a dispersed workforce at all levels, and so device management and authorization for different types of devices and accesses must be a really hairy part of your job. How does that fit across all levels of networks?
Absolutely. No, I agree with everything that have been said already, but it is very important in my environment, specifically here at CENTCOM, and how we operate, that bring your own device is something we need in the future. And I believe in how we speak about it here at CENTCOM and the team, and we relay up to the Joint Staff J6 and others, is that we're all comfortable on a daily basis when we pick up our phone, we join a bank, we look at our finances, we move money around, we take pictures of a check, we deposit the check, and we're comfortable with that, the security level that that bank provides us. So why not build the same environment? That database is large. It has large corporations in there, but for some odd reason, when they use the app, they're secured. We feel comfortable that we're secured in this container, and they only reach for your information in that database. They don't reach for anyone else's information. And that's displayed as an object view to you on that screen. You then interact with it. When you release out of that app, it goes back into the container or back into the database, and you move off and you do your work on a daily basis. So what I have the team looking at is, again, working in that transport agnostic environment, looking at a data-centric connection, and then how can we then use attributes to then release information to that person that is trying to access the data. And so that's what data centricity at the end of the day is trying to use machine learning and AI to find it. And that's where we need help from industry. That's really where we need all the help. So I put that out to industry. I know you're listening today, but we here at CENTCOM are going to work with partners, and we need to share our information with them, both ally and partners. So different way of sharing information, but we need that help in order to display from a single document with multiple security measures, whether it's secret no form or secret 5 eyes, but release only the information on that document to that person by their credential. And I'll stop there.
That's fascinating. That point on data centricity is really important. Doug Cossa from DIA, you mentioned two really interesting data-centric aspects. You mentioned Mars, and you mentioned JWICS. with the implication of JWICs, of course, being high side data. Yesterday, General Ashley, your boss, director of DIA, mentioned another aspect and component of DIA, the National Center for Medical Intelligence, NCMI, and the role that it's had in the pandemic. That can be a really different kind of data. And we've got this emerging, some have called it a decade of biotech, where we're going to have different kinds of structured databases, very relevant for medical intelligence and also the IC contribution on vaccine research and other kinds of medical research. How does this world of evolving data, and particularly when you're going to be using data-hungry machine learning to make sense of most of it, how does that? How do you see that stretching your systems and your workforce in the coming years?
Yeah. So on the system side, really two aspects that come to mind. One, of course, is the bandwidth that we need to actually have in place a healthy foundation to actually move that data, move the analytics that come from it. The second piece being the whole data strategy that we need to rethink, where traditionally we moved replicated data around to give it to the tool, right? So we kept data inherent within the tool that we were using to process and assess and manipulate that data. That mindset has changed, where we're bringing data to where it's needed, which has really kind of changed the entire strategy for how we think about not only how we share within the agency, but across the community. One of the bigger things, though, that concerns me, it's not a technical issue, and we're making progress here, is the concept of a data owner versus a data steward. So traditionally, if you are generating the data or assessing that data, the feeling has been you own that and you protect it, as opposed to what's really shifted over recent years is a data steward. You need to understand not only your inherent functions, but what comes next in that chain of interfaces across the intelligence lifecycle. More as a data steward of how do you influence the next step in intelligence. That's changing, and I think that's been the proliferation of data across the community and how we're integrating across the IC. So that's been positive. What concerns me, though, of course, is the tradecraft that goes into it. And I always give the example of when we don't understand where the data is coming from, the assumptions that went into it, we begin to treat these things like a black box. And the example I give is I have a newer car, not to brag, but it's a 2019 Toyota Sienna minivan. And it has a lot of aids on it, automated aids. You could argue are artificial intelligence, to where when I'm reversing, I'll get notifications of cars coming, people walking behind me, where I may not be able to see them in their mirror. What happens is I forget to think. So when I hop in my wife's car, which is a much older 10-year-old car, which doesn't have any of those features, I find myself just backing out into the road without looking, right into traffic. The implications on intelligence are the same. We have to remember to think. I don't think the data strategies, the AI, the machine learning is going to be at the point anytime soon to where it replaces critical thinking. And I think that's the most important aspect that we need to remember in all of this, is understanding what assumptions went into the data, sharing our homework across the IC of how we came to certain conclusions, identifying what we know and what we don't know. It's really the same tradecraft principles that apply to more traditional analysis need to apply to data science and artificial intelligence and the analysis that stems from that.
Let me ask Greg Smithberger, since NSA is probably the agency that's been dealing with research, cutting edge research in AI and ML for the longest period of time in the community. So I'm guessing you're the most impervious to AI hype, the hype cycle that other industry and commercial vendors sometimes engender, or at least try to ward off, maybe. How do you see, what's your realistic assessment of the contribution of AI in the NSA IT world of the future?
So happy to address that. I'd like to address the data centricity just for a moment, because that's sort of of why we built the IC Gov Cloud in the first place. We had the ambition of tearing down all the stovepipes where we had separate processing for each different type of collection and tools around that, to putting all the data into one environment, and being able to look at all the data as an integrated whole, being able to search, correlate across that, getting big data analytics, the machines to help assist the humans. But the problem is need to know really matters in the intelligence community, right? So how do you have those benefits or the shared data pools that Doug was talking about while still enforcing need to know and compliance rules? So we built the GovCloud from the ground up with this thought in mind, so that with the data comes knowledge of where it came from and what the rules are in terms of how it needs to be handled and who has a need to know. And the systems are enforcing that need to know, so that if the humans make a mistake, there's a safety net there. Or Sue and I could do exactly the same search using the same tools in the same environment. We'll get very different answers because we're cleared for different things and we're only served up exactly what we need to know. When that's designed the right way, you can actually turn the big data analytics loose as long as they're compliant with this environment, and they can do their thing and still serve up only what people are authorized to see. So really, really kind of key. We'd have a long conversation about that. So it also enables that sort of coalition sharing environment that the general was talking about if you get that right. So lots to talk about there. AI, machine learning.
Well, on that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, really quickly on that. So more pointedly on machine learning. So in that same environment you were just describing with IC GovCloud, how about the role of shared services like training models and algorithmic libraries? Is that a reality today for folks across the distributed tech workforce?
In many areas it is. NSA has been working for over a decade on machine learning and AI. Our work initially sort of focused on human language. We get large volumes of speech. How do you make that as easy to deal with as English text, in spite of the fact that it's coming at us in every sort of language and dialect you can possibly imagine, right? That was sort of the original motivation. And how do we identify languages and speakers? How do we do automated translation of that voice in various languages into English text? How do we get the machines to help us search through that for exactly what we're looking for so the human doesn't have to listen to hours and hours and hours before they find something interesting, right? That was the heart of our machine learning and AI, and we've made a lot of progress on that. We have a combination of some open source technology, some industry technology, some unique NSA developed technology. We have sort of a hybrid of that, video, image, speech, text analysis. That's really been the bulk of our work there. Lots of really advanced capabilities at scale, making more and more of that available to the IC as well. Again, tied into that GovCloud environment. So there's a lot we can do, but I would say that in terms of the maturity scale, we have a lot of big data analytics, a lot of automation. We have a lot of machine learning that's really doing interesting things. We have some interesting things that we're doing with, I would say, unsupervised learning that starts to look a little bit more like actual AI. But the things that are actually AI are more at the beginning of the spectrum. And everything we're doing is really about accelerating, about making the humans more effective and efficient. It's not replacing them. It may be the human would do the same thing over and over again, so let's just automate that so the human doesn't have to do that every day. But it's all about making the humans more effective and efficient. It's not about replacing them. But there are some really cool things that we're doing in terms of trying to, here's a big mountain of data. What's it about without directing that? There's all sorts of cool things that we're doing there that look like unsupervised learning and those sorts of things that are moving in the direction of AI. But there's a lot more machine learning. There's a lot more automation. There's a lot more big data analytics that's real today. The AI, there's some interesting stuff that has a long way to go. That's my view.
Yeah, and I do want to I want to reiterate what Greg said in terms of the policies, the laws that apply to different agencies, and how users need to be mindful of that. Before, you had to have kind of an encyclopedia in your head. We've automated that now to a large extent for the users, so they can focus on their tradecraft, as opposed to thinking about all the other factors at play. That's now associated as part of the data strategy, and those laws and policies are tied to data elements.
Yeah. We've got ask a kind of wrap-up thing here, and for each of you, take a minute. Or not, you're not all going to have this dream job forever. You're going to have a successor, and I'm curious about what individual leaders put in that for their successor. I ask, it goes without saying that you rely on industry partners and allied partners, other government agency partnerships. What's the key partnership that he or she fit the most from? What should be 18 months following on your great work? And let's start with Sue Dorr.
I'm not positive.
It's a brain teaser.
Because I missed quite a bit of what that question was.
What would you to focus on? What would you advise? Partnerships, industry, your agency partnerships. Where will they get the most bang for their buck?
If I'm understanding correctly, it's bringing up the next set of leaders into this environment, and really, how do we partner in order to achieve what we do, or where would I encourage them to really build those relationships and partners? I think we've hit across many of them and discussed them already today. It's because we're having to move, and we need to move so quickly, and we are working towards shared services. It's working with our other IC element partnerships and larger DoD, because there's many things that have already been looked at before. And so there's just not enough time in the day to reinvent everything. Doug mentioned our enterprise agreements and enterprise licenses, and really how we leverage those to the most extent possible, and to continue to mature and build those out is really going to be something that I would look at my predecessor and say, pay attention to that, push it, talk about your needs, make sure that we're looking and working at that together. And we cannot underestimate how important that is, and how quickly we can move IT capabilities if we have the ability to share those type of services and agreements. So those are the handful of areas that I think we've hit in many different topics today, but it's just to continue to not go stovepipe, to not go insularity, and to work and achieve things with all of the people we've discussed.
Okay, General, where do you get the most bang for your buck, and what would you
Yeah, great. Thanks again. I think it's threefold for me, and I think most folks in the future is going to be one, the protection of data. I think data is just something that we're going to deal with for the rest of our lives. The protection of data, the ability to access the data. Like I said, transport agnostic. Anywhere in the world, we should have our leaders and be able to access the data to make informed decisions. And then the last piece is the ability to share the data, not only with ourselves, but with our partners and our allies as well. I mean, that's just a world that I live in. I think it's a world that we'll continue to live in. And those three things are going to be important going forward. And I think that's where we need to help. Because in those clouds environments, we're going to have to protect the data there. That's going to be the next area that we're targeting. So let's look how we can protect them in the cloud, how we can share it, and then have access to the data in the future using an agnostic environment. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Joe.
Well, I'll go quickly.
Let's
I think. Yep.
Go ahead, Doug. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say I think Sue hit the nail on the head to where we're not looking at capabilities in a stovepipe fashion just within DIA as an example. As a community, we're building towards reference architectures, designing integration at the outset. Makes it much harder to integrate tools if we think about it at the latter end of the development and integration spectrum. So it's not just a partnership with government, it's a partnership between industry as well to look at how do we integrate tools and the applications and the data across rather than thinking about that as an afterthought.
That's great. And Greg, if we've got Greg?
Yes. So I think the mindset is what's most important here, to be ruthless about assessing where someone else has actually solved your problem to your close enough to your standard so that you can build upon their work and partner with them as opposed to solving the same problem over and over again. We're always trying to make sure that we're putting our energy into unsolved problems, not just reworking the same problem that 10,000 other people have. And we didn't talk about our hybrid compute initiative today, but that's a lot of what that's about. Going off premise with some of our classified foundational pieces where industry players can actually provide those capabilities as well as we can. There's nothing that's unique to NSA's mission about those foundational pieces. How we use them is very unique, but our industry partners can build data centers and cloud services and hardware as a service and keep that fresh and up to date and build value-added services on top of that to do generic compute things. We're interested in doing less of the generic and more of the tailored and specific to our mission and integration. Same thing in terms of the partnership with others in the IC. Hey, Doug solved a problem that we've been trying to solve. Let's partner, let's leverage that, let's put our pieces together, let's move further and faster together. The same attitude with our foreign partners. So I don't think there's a maximum leverage from any one of those. It's all the above, and it's being ruthless about determining where you're getting the most bang for your buck. And if you have a solution, being willing to open that up to others who need your help. And as I think Doug said earlier, we've got a really great team of CIOs across the community that have really been working together on problems and frankly bringing their mission elements and the mission technology partners to the table as well. And I think that's key. And we have many of the same partnerships with our foreign partners as well. And of course, industry is underpinning everything that all of us are doing. And we couldn't do it without them.
I think that's a welcome mindset, and I want to thank this extraordinary panel of CIOs. Thanks for your participation today. I'll turn it back quickly to AFCEA's Ray Cross.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you to all our panelists. We will now take a 30-minute break. Please take some time to visit the kiosks in our virtual exhibit hall. Some of the exhibitors are raffling off prizes, so be sure to make the rounds of the kiosks that interest you. When we return at 4 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ignite Round plenary session, senior technology leaders from CIA, IARPA, Microsoft, and Maxar will deliver TED-style talks on the IC's requirements, applications for emerging technologies, and strategies for fostering innovation in the intelligence and national security communities. We look forward to seeing you after the break.